Kevin Callahan. Thank you for joining the show. CEO of Uniblock and co-founder. Really appreciate having you on. I know you used to work for Twitter and Coinbase as well. So maybe just tell us your journey a little bit about what brought you to Uniblock and your story to today.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So a little bit about myself. I had a couple of startups. I had one reasonable exit. Ended up at a company called Wattpad, which is the largest social network for writers. Then I ended up at Twitter, led a number of different initiatives. Probably the most relevant would be crypto at Twitter. Then I was at Coinbase, like you mentioned, so a number of different initiatives, everything from like commerce, payments, NFTs, international, which is really fun. And after their IPO, I got into more angel investing. So one of my investments had their first IPO in this psychedelic space, which was really cool. I'm an LP in some funds, so things like AI, blockchain, just that kind of thing. And then I donate my time to some college universities, and that brought us to Uniblock. And I'm sure we're going to talk all about it. But yeah, that's where I am now.
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, why don't you? You know what? Let's get right into Uniblock because I'm very curious about what you guys do at Uniblock. So please take it away.
Yeah, sure. So in Web 2, the tech stack, and I'm going to make it kind of simple, is it's hardened. We've had 20 years to build it, and you'll like have your technology layer, you'll have your servers, so they will manifest themselves in something like either GCP now, AWS, maybe on-prem. And then on top of that, you'll have things like Apogee or Kong or AWS API Manager, and that allows the developer to interact with the various technologies and APIs and create things like routing and fallback. And it's not normal for Instagram or Uber to go down because we have this hardened tech stack. But in Web3, we don't really have any of that. We have the protocol, so let's say Ethereum, then you'll have something like a QuickNode or an Alchemy, and then you're expected to kind of bolt right on top of that. And so all of that fallback, all of that routing is expected to be done on the side of the entrepreneur, of the startup. And so that's what we've built. So Uniblock has somewhere in the order of about 50 partners, Alchemy, QuickNode, Moralis, kind of all of them. We have almost 100 protocols, everything from Ethereum to Ton, everything in between. And we're getting to the point where we have something in the range of 1,500 APIs, which means that if it exists, we have it. And if it doesn't, we can get it made. And we save our customers time, money, and we route them to the fastest, cheapest place. So that's what we've done. We've raised a few $1 million last year. We've got about 3,000 projects and developers using it. We're just killing it, loving it.
Very cool. You guys don't have a coin per se. It's more of a...
Yeah, we don't. So we support hundreds of coins, but we're looking at Web 2. And you look at companies like I mentioned, Kong or Apogee, which was sold for a little over 600 million to Google about a decade ago. Even things like Plaid and all these other companies. And if we just follow in their footsteps, there's this nice trail. We think we can have a really large, impactful company. And the token doesn't make a ton of sense for us right now.
Right.
And frankly, if it doesn't make sense, don't do it. So that's kind of our thought process.
Very cool. So do you guys have like a sales team that reaches out to all these different developers of these coins, or how are you guys bringing on new business?
Yeah, we do. So a lot of it is also founder-led sales. So I'm kind of reaching out. We do have a sales team. And then we also have product-led growth. So we have some of the best like SEO people and just like growth people in the market. And we also frankly get a lot of word of mouth. Developers use it, they save a lot of money, they're excited, and they just say, hey, you should use Uniblock. So we kind of have everything, all the above, and kind of working for us right now.
Perfect. So how long have you been in the crypto space? When did you start investing, I guess, into crypto?
Yeah, so I was aware of Bitcoin extremely early, and so I was in Bitcoin. But I think when we start talking about crypto outside of that, the story is a little bit more interesting, I guess. So I mentioned I worked at Wattpad, and I worked at Twitter, and I worked at Coinbase. And one of the connective tissues between those three is Union Square Ventures out of New York. So Fred Wilson, Albert Wenger, and So Fred is on the board at Coinbase. He was actually the guy that was kicking out Jack Dorsey back in whatever it was, 2010, and they invested in Wattpad. So he famously had like a daily blog where it would be, his thoughts. And he was I think he was like one of the earliest people into Ethereum and Algorand and kind of all those early stage, you know, projects about a decade ago. And so he started, blogging about it. And in my head, like my mental model was, okay, it's just digital gold, right? 2013, 2014. And then they started talking about like smart contracts and things like that. And so just bending my mind around, okay, so now you have cryptocurrency, and the cryptocurrency actually is a protocol that has like actual smart contracts. So that was probably 2015 or so, maybe a little earlier. And a nice corollary to that, because we were at Twitter at the time, we were able to invite kind of the founders of, and also we also had an office in Toronto where a lot of the Ethereum people are from. And so we hosted really early meetups like 10 years ago where the Ethereum founders would come and just teach us stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my story, how I got into it.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I was at the crypto conference in Toronto, the Futures conference a couple weeks ago. Anthony Delorio from Toronto was one of the keynote speakers, one of the founders of Ethereum, obviously. Very interesting guy, working on a really cool project right now. Pretty amazing what some of these projects are going to be coming on board on blockchain technology. It's especially AI specific projects are really, really exciting. So what's your favorite project right now? What's your number one holding outside of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so when we start talking about is it investment, I mean, clearly I'm all in on Uniblock, and we've got, it's a private enterprise and I have, a large amount of shares. And then after that, I'm kind of a Luddite. I have, Bitcoin, even though you didn't want me to add that. I have Ethereum, and then maybe a little bit of like Solana and, projects that my friends are launching that I support. But I don't think of myself. I mean, actually, I'll tell you about another story in a second. I'm no longer like a trader. I generally don't go too far at the risk curve when we start thinking about crypto. Mostly just supporting my friends and family, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very cool. Do you dabble in precious metals too, or are you sticking to crypto right now?
So when we talk about precious metals, I've been in the miners. I've been in and out of GLD. I generally don't take actual possession of the physical underlying asset just because I don't have anywhere to put it, and I'm not like really set up for that. But yeah, I do sometimes go long on the underlying either ETF or the miners. I think are kind of an interesting play over the last couple of years. Of course, we're sitting here close to all-time highs, so it's a fascinating time to be in gold.
Yeah, and miners are near all-time lows in comparison to the price of the commodity itself. So huge opportunity. I agree on the miners big time. I think if gold doubles, you could see these miners go up 3, 4, 5, 10 times. So yeah, that's an exciting space to be for sure. It's kind of like altcoins of the crypto market in a bull market.
Yeah,
So
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the miners have been left behind, and so yeah, as we see gold up and we see maybe some of their input costs, like fuel costs and things like that, come down, should be really interesting.
very interesting, very interesting. So obviously, all the talk right now is around Powell's statements. I think it was yesterday regarding lowering interest rates. So I know you had Citibank come out and announce they think the U.S. is going to lower rates 8 times over the next 12 to 16 months. So, I mean, obviously that's going to be super, super bullish for both crypto, precious metals, all asset classes. So tell me what your thoughts on are in terms of the next 12 months and where you see opportunity specifically based off of these rate reductions that are probably going to happen. Maybe not as many as they expect. We'll see how inflation reacts over the coming months. But yeah, tell me your thoughts over the next 12 months where you see opportunity.
Yeah, when we look at fiscal and monetary policy, it's been a tale of two completely different tapes. So we have all governments around the world, not just the U.S., but the Feds, sorry, the Bank of Canada. We're talking about the Canadian government, the Australian government, the Japanese government, just flooding the market with cheap liquidity, helicopter money. So we're seeing that. And then on the other side, we're seeing the various central banks start to try to tame that over the last 2 years or so. In the US and Canada, we're sitting at kind of the last like 20-year highs in terms of interest rates. So Canada was one of the first central banks to move. They've done two cuts and the same amount of like meetings. That will continue most likely. The CPI, obviously there's a 2.5 print in Canada recently, so it seems like it's the right trajectory. Kind of interestingly enough, you see the pieces that are staying elevated. So cost of homes, interest rates are impacting that directly. So, kind of perversely, as you start to lower the rate, that will start to, bring that piece down. If you strip that out, we're already in a recession. Canada's already in a recession. Most governments are already in a recession. If you look at the US, they had 800,000 jobs that were ghost jobs. So I think we're actually in a much worse spot than anybody realizes. I think that we're in a place where they have to look at the amount of debt. I mean, the US is in 35 trillion. Canada is, not doing much better. If you start to look at the provincial and various other municipal governments, I'm Canadian, by the way. I live in the US, but I'm Canadian, so I'll say us. So I think we have to roll over a lot of the debt in most of these countries. And so my sense is that we're going to be, seeing a lot of liquidity. If you already look at M2 and just general money supply, that's already increasing. Tends to happen around every 4 years or so, usually around the US election. So I think it's not just a story of US or Canada. It really is a global phenomenon where money was cheap, rates went high, economies aren't doing so great. Money needs to come back to being cheap. Consumers are mostly tapped out. So you're seeing, especially in Canada, the Canadian government is the employer of choice. We added something like 175,000 people in the country in 1 month, and we lost 11,000 jobs. And if you actually look at that between private and public, it was the public added 50,000, private lost 40,000. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive. But if you could tell by my underlying tone, it feels like it's going to become a situation where money's cheaper. People are starting to do helicopter money in some way or shape or form. Economy is slowing down, so think about where you're going to allocate your dollars. But yeah, and then one last thing I'll say is that there are a number of elections around the world over the course of the next 12 months. Canada, US, we just saw one in England. And so generally when a politician's about to lose, they give things away for free. And generally when politicians want to get in, they want to give things away for free. It's weird how that happens. So yeah, it sounds like in general, that's kind of where we're going in the next 12 to 18 months. And, you just got to get your positions ready now.
So maybe tell me about the risks of all this cheap money and helicopter money. I mean, obviously, it's not all good. It's not just because people have a lower mortgage payment or their stock portfolio went up or their crypto holdings went up in price. What's the downside of all this? Because obviously there's going to be some major ramifications of these cheap rates. And I don't think the current inflation numbers that they report of 2.5% are anywhere near the reality. So maybe you tell me what your thoughts are in terms of what the downside potential is of all of this cheap money over the coming 12 months.
Yeah, well, we know that the CPI numbers around the world are not necessarily correct because when they want to take fuel out, they'll take fuel out. When they want to take food out, they'll take food out. When they want to bring in whatever. So yeah, we know that that's incorrect. And we also know that, again, the US government overcounted 800,000 jobs and just had to go back and say, oh, sorry. So yeah, we know that those numbers are not correct. And even that's in the West. If you look at China, they just always seem to print the number they need to print. So being the second largest economy, it's a little bit scary. At some point, you fall off a cliff, kind of like Japan in the 80s. So what are the risks? I think, first off, we have to service the debt. So they need lower rates generally. And then you see that with this force of, okay, we need to bring things down. We need to be able to service this debt. In the US, it's a huge line item. In Canada, it's one of the largest line items, something like $50 billion that need to be turned over and paid. So yeah, I mean, I think the risk is that most consumers are tapped out. Most easy markets like China are becoming less easy. Their population is starting to shrink. And so just like Japan in the 80s, that was the place that McDonald's, Starbucks, Nike, right? We're going to grow in China. It's one market. We go there and we grow. That's, starting to kind of end. So I think it really just depends on your time horizon. Are you talking about the next 6 months, next 6 years, next 60 years? It just depends. But I think that comes back to your love affair with, things like gold and all these types of assets. Because one thing is for sure, we will be inflating the various currencies around the world. And so that really just impacts your buying power and kind of your quality of life, specifically in the West. But what we don't realize is how absolutely fucked, and I can swear on this, right? How absolutely fucked everybody is in other countries. If you're sitting in Nigeria and you're making 800 US dollars a year as your GDP per capita, and all of a sudden inflation's 10%, 20%, it's a matter of life or death. And so, yes, it's very annoying for us, depending on where your socioeconomic standing is in the West, but it really is life or death around the world as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, believe it or not, and even in US and Canada, I think we're going to get to that point. I mean, if inflation's closer to the numbers we probably think of, 10 to 20%, I mean, 5 years down the road, if they continue to lower rates like they plan to over the next 12 to 24 months, I mean, who knows what these interest rates are, or these inflation numbers are going to be. And the reality is, I see the middle class being completely pushed to the side and brought down to lower class and being completely wiped out. And obviously, that, my opinion is, that's been the globalist plans for decades, right? And it's working to perfection, because the middle class is already. I mean, to buy a house in today's world, if you are coming out of school, or even in your 10 years into your career, is such a daunting task to be able to come up with $1 million to buy a house in Canada or in the US. So, I mean, I think the risk, and that's why I advocate precious metals and cryptocurrencies as much as I do, because I know the inflation that's going to come over the coming years, those asset prices are going to go up so much in price that they can actually save you from that inflation. Where if you're not sitting in assets of any sort, if you're just sitting in traditional assets like bonds or stocks or real estate, I don't think those are going to protect you enough with the inflation that we're going to see. So that's why I think these assets that I mentioned, precious metals, specifically silver and cryptocurrencies, I mean, those assets can go up 5, 10, 20 times. But stocks, I mean, if your upside's 20, 30%, that's not going to save you from inflation that's gone up over 100% over the next 5 years. So that's really the reason I push those assets as much as I do. Now, I mean, obviously we got the elections coming up. What are your thoughts? Who do you think is going to win? Do you think it really matters? Do you think they already picked the winner? That's been my philosophy, that these politicians are all hand selected years ago. So what are your thoughts on the upcoming election in the U.S.? Who do you think is going to win, and what do you think the implications will be based off of that?
Yeah, I mean, so I've tweeted this out somewhat recently, but it feels like we know Trump, right? There's not really much you can say today that would be shocking at this point. So he's a known entity, and it's kind of all on the table. Whereas Kamala is not a known entity. Most voters don't really know her. They've never really heard her speak. They're not really familiar with her policies. So it feels like Trump peaked when he got shot, which is already outside of the news cycle, which is kind of funny. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez will be in the news cycle longer than a previous president getting shot.
So
Um,
true. It's
but I
crazy.
think it is crazy. Uh, but I do think that Kamala also peaked when Biden took a knee and sat down. He gave up. Kamala came in, took his place. Everybody kind of rallied behind her. And you can see that in the betting markets, both in Poly Market and in Vegas or wherever you want to go. Um, and I think the downside risk is with Kamala because again, there's not much more that could possibly come out that would impact people's decision to vote for him. But there's a lot that Kamala can say that would impact their decision to vote. So if I were a betting man, I would put money on Trump just based on the time to the election, what's already out. Um, but you never know. It's hard to guess.
And the reality is, I mean, whether it's Trump or Kamala, they're both going to be easy money. Still going to be happening, right? I mean, Trump wants to keep interest rates low. Trump wants to keep the stock market high, as do the Democrats. So I mean, in that regard, when it comes to the Fed, I don't really you're not going to get much. There's not much difference there. They both bow down to the Fed and they both do whatever the Fed wants. So I don't, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter who wins. Yeah, there's going to be some differences when it comes to business owners, and which is really important. I'm not going to try to downplay that, but the reality is the Fed is the biggest issue in our world today, and until that issue gets addressed, I mean, the U.S. is going to go down and go down hard as long as they continue to keep interest rates as low as they do. I mean, the reality is we should be raising rates right now, not lowering rates. I mean, allow the recession to happen. Try not trying to keep blowing up these bubbles bigger than they actually need to be, because in the end, the crash is going to be that much worse. And I don't think it matters who's in power, whether it's Kamala or Trump. I think the financial system will likely implode in the next 4 years. I don't see how they can keep it all together. And they may, but the reality is, I think there's over 200 regional banks in the U.S. right now that are deemed insolvent. So I think it's just a matter of time before they start allowing some of these regional banks to go down. And maybe they do bail them out. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. Them bailing them out is even worse. That's just more money printing. That's just more easy money. Money just going to the banks, never coming back to the people, just causing prices to go up higher. So, I mean, I know people are really, really all for Trump, or the opposite. For me, I don't really think it matters. I'm pulling for Trump. Not, I don't know why, but just because I know how bad Kamala will be. I just heard recently. I don't know if this is true. Tell me if you've heard this regarding Kamala talking about giving $20,000 to everybody who's looking to build a house. Have you heard this? Is that true? Maybe tell me a little bit about that, and tell me your thoughts on if she were to win, what would happen.
Yeah, I think first off, I agree with you that both sides are looking to spend. None of them are looking to pull back. The Tea Party days of whatever it was a decade ago are firmly in the rearview mirror. So I think if Kamala wins, you start to see more spending around November when she gets her team in place. Takes a couple like a month or so. And if it's Trump, it's probably somewhere in like January, February, we start to see more spending and more pressure. So really just a matter of when, not if, for sure. Totally agree. And then with regards to her policies, if you look back at her platform back in 2020 when she was trying to be the Democratic nominee, yeah, she was definitely very pro like spending, very far on the left, and so irrespective of its 20,000 to buy something or unrealized gains and taxes, I think that it doesn't really matter. We're just going to see more of the same, which is high spending, more taxes, more printing, and yeah, it doesn't really help anybody in that situation.
No, I mean, the U.S. is going to have, and honestly, the whole world is just going to, the chaos that is going to ensue over the coming months and years, in my opinion, is going to be unprecedented. And I think what we're about to go through is going to be a lot worse than the Great Depression. You can already argue now the cost of living with the inflation, how much it takes to earn to just pay bills nowadays is worse now today than it's ever been in history. I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but I know when I compared it to the percentages back in the Great Depression, the cost of living today is it's almost impossible to get by, even with two incomes. It's just, I mean, you can argue right now we're in a depression, if you base it off of the cost of living. And I understand people are still spending and people, so it's not like a depression yet. But the reality is, people are living above their means. People are at peak credit card debt. So I don't really see this continuing on much longer, before people really start to tighten up and stop spending. And I think a few things can happen to for that to happen. I think a war escalating could lead to that. I think regional bank failures could lead to that. You could have some black swan event prior to the elections that could lead to that. So even like a COVID type event where everybody just stops spending money, and I think that's where we're heading to. Some type of an event that freaks people out, scares people, and then we're gonna just rush right into a recession/depression at that point. And how long it lasts, I don't know, but I think it's going to be a long one, a lot longer than COVID per se. And I don't know what that event's going to be. It could be so many things. It could be a cyber attack, blamed on whichever country they want to choose, whether it's Russia or Iran or whoever. So I just think the world's going to be pretty crazy over the coming months and years. Do you have the same kind of mindset? Do you think there is going to be some type of black swan event that changes this world in a big, big way?
It's funny. I mean, if you look at the millennials and now the Gen Z, they're getting a black swan event that happens once in 100 years. They're getting one every 5 years, right? We've got like,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, we've got,
And
obviously we had COVID. Before that, we had like the global financial crisis. We've had, Y2K. Like it's just every 7 years there's something serious. Generally, you have a recession every 7 years. That's kind of the average. But we're having these like black swan events. Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge of all of this in the West is that we've had this underlying contract, which is you work hard and you can, move up in the world. You can, if you work hard, get an education, get a trade, you make some money, buy a house, you meet your significant other, you have your 2 point whatever kids, um, and we're going to provide safety and security, and you just have to, follow that path, and you can have a home, you can like retire at the age of whatever, 65, 67, whatever, area you're in. Um, but unfortunately, that contract is now void. There's very little chance in most markets that somebody graduating now from pick your undergrad is going to be able to, get a decent job, um, rent something nice, buy something nice, save for that down payment by themselves, meet a significant other, have a child under the age of before they're 40. Um, so I think the challenge there is that since that contract is now disputed, we see social unrest around the world, and you're seeing it. You're seeing it manifest itself in England in one way, in Canada another way, in the U.S. even a third way. But it all comes down from the same, I think, nucleus, which is, hey, like I did everything right. I grew up, I got a job, went to school, got a job, met my wife. We can't afford a house. We can't afford kids. I can barely afford my car payments. I can barely afford to, eat. Like, this is not fair. And I'm going to demonstrate in some way. And so I think that's where we're going. I think that we're already seeing that where, I look at my team. So most of my team is fairly young. They're mostly all, call it Gen Z. And we after work we have drinks, and they're like, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford a home. And these are fairly well paid engineers in a top market. Um, and the answer is they might be right, because I look at my family and all my friends. It's the same situation where if you don't have a family member stepping in, you have to be very, very lucky, because hard work won't necessarily get you there. You could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could be whatever, and you still can't afford to live in a place. You're a doctor, you're making $250,000. Generally, that means you can afford what, 4x for a mortgage, so you can afford a $1 million mortgage, minus your debt from your schooling, your car. What are you going to get for $1 million mortgage in most of these markets? Like, not very much. And that's a doctor. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that now. So whether or not a meteor hits us and we see a black swan event, or we just continue down this road, I think we're gonna have some serious issues when the next generation realizes that it's like, hey, you guys really fucked me. This is not fair. I'm going to riot or demonstrate.
Yeah, I think there's no choice, especially with what's coming with these interest rate cuts coming. I mean, the inflation that is going to come after that, in my opinion, is going to be the worst that we've seen. Like, I know they admitted to 9% not too long ago in Canada. I mean, what are they going to admit to this time around? I mean, if it's above 10%, I mean, that means reality is 20 to 30% inflation, which I do think is going to happen. And I think we're almost there right now. And all these new rate reductions and more money printing programs, if the war escalates, if the banks go down, you're going to have to inject trillions and trillions of dollars. And that's just to keep the system afloat. That's not accomplishing anything. It's just bailing out banks or just help facilitating a war or paying for weapons. It's adding zero value to the people, to the middle class. So, I mean, all it's going to do is just, again, continue to drive inflation higher. So I just see the situation getting worse and worse and worse here on out. I mean, because at this point they've already admitted, and I knew this was going to happen last year when they started raising rates. I said, yeah, they'll raise them to 5%. And I said, and then they can't go any higher because you saw what happened last time. They raised to 5%. The banks started to fail. Um, you saw Silicon Valley and a couple others go down, got to 5% again, and yeah, there was rumblings and rumors of all these bank failures to come, and now they're saying, okay, we better reduce these because we don't want all these bank failures. I don't think this is going to stop the bank failures from happening, personally, but I mean, it will cause some relief. Hopefully, because the housing markets, from what I'm hearing across the board, have really, really slowed down, and even new construction, even renovations, like trades that I talk to, they're slow. They're not doing much at all right now. They're waiting for jobs, which is the first we've really seen that in quite some time in Canada. I mean, these trades have been busy and busy for years and years and years. This is the first time I've been hearing that they have no work, and people aren't, the homes aren't being built. So I don't know. I mean, I think the economy is just going to get worse and worse, and I don't think reducing interest rates by a quarter point here and there is really going to make an impact, other than the superficial impact of people thinking they're wealthier than they are because their mortgage payments aren't as high. But I don't know. I don't know. Tell me about your what you're seeing in crypto. I mean, I'm kind of the belief of we got another 6 to 12 months of a bull market. Maybe we get to 150K Bitcoin, somewhere in that range. Maybe tell me what you think. And then I honestly think then you're going to have, once they have to raise rates again, which will be at some point late 2025, my guess, that'll be the beginning of the bear market again, across the board: stocks, bonds, real estate, um, crypto. That's kind of what I think. I think lowering rates until the middle of 2025. Once inflation gets crazy and they have to raise rates again, I think that's when you see all markets really tumble. And who knows, there might even be some type of a couple black swan events in the crypto markets. Maybe, who knows what they have planned, some type of Luna type of event, or whatever that, what was the crypto exchange, FTX. So who knows? I'm sure they have something planned around that time where they want to bring the markets down. But do you kind of think the same, like 6 to 12 months left of a bull market in crypto, or you kind of have a different outlook than everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, historically, somewhere in the 18-month range after the halving is when we see things like start to kind of a blow off top, and that would be we had it in January. So yeah, I mean that would bring us to about a year from now, which would make sense. And I think that is the way it's historically been. I think there might be some changes here, just throwing that out there to take the other side of the debate, just to have some fun. One is obviously the US ETFs. So that brings in kind of an exogenous factor that we didn't necessarily have in the other cycles. Yes, we had Australian, Canadian ETFs, but now we have this, American on-ramp, which I think is really interesting. I think the other thing is just the amount of pressure on lowering rates and spending more money. So I think another piece of the puzzle that has been there, but maybe in a lesser degree in other cycles. And as normal, we generally have like a new US president every 4 years is generally when we have the halving. It's kind of interesting how that works. Obviously, Satoshi created this after the global financial crisis. So yeah, I think that if your time horizons are 10 years out, it doesn't really matter. You just dollar cost average into your, Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, and you sleep at night. That's sort of my take on the world. However, if you're trying to time the market, let's say you're Uniblock and you want to raise a round before everybody goes to sleep for 2 years, then yeah, you should probably get out there in the next couple of months and make sure that you've got your bank account full so you can like weather any storm. But the answer is, yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know when we'll see.
Do you dollar cost average out like the last bull market? Were you taking profits on the way up, or is that your plan again this bull market, or are you kind of holding for the next 10, 20 years and you don't care about the price change?
Yeah, the latter. I don't really care. I think it's fun. It's like a nice scorecard. But I'm the same thing with my S&P, ETF, like 401k purchases or TFSA, RSP purchases. Like I just buy and hold. I don't really sell. I don't really worry about it. I think it really just, it really comes down to your time horizons. If you're, let's say 55 or above, you should be looking at it and thinking, okay, now I got to get, I don't want to be so far out the risk curve that all of a sudden an 80% pullback really impacts my ability to retire. And that could be 55, 60, whatever, talk to your financial advisor. I think if you're, under the age of 40, you just buy and hold and don't worry about it. I think that's kind of the way if you really want to maximize your money. And actually earlier in this podcast, I said, hey, you know what? I'm not a trader anymore. And I said, what I was alluding to was back in 2015 to 2017, a good friend and I, like, we were in everything. We were in all the early ICOs. We were in all the early stuff. And you'd be on like Facebook, like groups talking about EOS or like XLM or figuring out if it's legit. And like, it was crazy. You'd be on Binance trying to learn Chinese, trying to like buy rando coins. And, we were really doing all this sort of stuff. And I would say at the end of it, I don't know, let's say 2017 or 2018, I looked at him and like, you know what, if we just bought Bitcoin and not done all this other stuff, we would have done better.
I know.
And I think just like the mental health and all of like the focus and everything that you're doing. So I don't have a lot of alpha in just trying to trade stuff that I don't have any visibility into. Again, if it's my friend's project, if I can like see something that's missing, sure. But I don't have alpha on Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. So generally, I just buy and hold. That's not totally true, actually. One side note is that because we've got so many developers and projects building on Uniblock, we get so much data. So, we knew that Solana was doing well 18 months ago, long before anybody else did. Because like, hey, a lot of people are hooking up with Solana. That's interesting. Or like Ton. Ton's like super popular now. We knew about Ton well before it became cool. So we do have a little bit of an edge. But generally, I would say just buy and hold because it's inevitable.
Uniblock, are you guys privately owned? Is it just you and a couple other guys, or?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, exactly. And we have some interesting data. We blog about it sometimes. We tweet about it sometimes. We share it with some investors and VCs. But it's interesting to see like, oh wow, it's like RWA is a big thing before it became a big thing, or DPIN, or yeah, just like how people are, what people are leveraging is, I think, a leading indicator with what you'll see, which is really interesting.
Very cool. Cool. So you mentioned Satoshi a little while ago. Um, so what are your thoughts on? I mean, are you in the camp that believes it's CIA, or are you in the camp that Satoshi really does care about the people and was looking to create a currency for the people for freedom, or you think it's a CIA? Um, I guess not
PSYOP.
racket, but they're the creator. Yeah, sure.
I have a bit more of a negative view in terms of, I don't even think any government agency can order like an Uber Eats as a team. Like I think if you like, when I saw Trump get shot, I had a bunch of like friends say, "Oh, it's, it's the CAA with the FBI and the local police, whatever." And I'm like, guys, five different people in a government office cannot make an Uber Eats order without fucking it up. So I'm not saying they wouldn't want to. I just don't feel like they would have any ability to do anything that's valuable whatsoever. So I don't know where that puts me on the spectrum, but I'm like over in my own path thinking like these people are all morons. I actually just don't believe they could do any of these things.
Hey, you can't, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for having that mindset because they are morons, but they do have unlimited money where they could get whoever they want to do anything they ask. So that's to their advantage for sure. But okay, so what about 10 years from now? Let's fast forward. How do you see how do you envision money? I mean, obviously there's has to be some type of reset between now and then. And maybe not. Maybe we just keep moving along and everybody's got their own currencies and everything stayed together somehow. But where do you see money and where do you see Bitcoin in terms of? Do you see people paying at Starbucks with Bitcoin, or do you think they'll be using a different crypto like Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash or some other faster currency? Like, where do you see money in the future? And do you think Bitcoin is going to be a big part of that?
Yeah, I think first off, there's a couple things that I believe. One is that yes, the US exceptionalism is under attack, but I would also say that they are the prettiest leper in the leper colony. And so if you want to be long, where would you be long at this point? Like Western Europe is so backwards. Then you've got like like China is not doing themselves any
No.
favors. So again, I guess like, do you want to be right or do you want to make money? And do you want to, I try not to be dogmatic or religious about my investing and like where I invest my time. I think about it, try to be pragmatic and try to like question myself. So as much as I think countries like the US are under attack, I would say that everybody else is doing an even poorer job. So that impacts some of my thinking and my mental model. I think the other question I usually ask myself, even when things are tough, because when we started building Uniblock, as you kind of mentioned, SVB was going bankrupt, like all the regional banks were under pressure, FTX obviously, Luna, as you mentioned, and everybody's like, "Oh, why don't you just build an AI product?" Okay, so an AI product, what am I going to do? I'm going to help people spend more money faster? Like that's not great. Or I'm going to like do like what, spam emails? Great. So when things were still tough, I asked myself, do I believe that the world will be more digital or less digital in a decade? And if the answer is more digital, great. So then that means that we have to have better on ramps, better rails, better access. And the third thing I kind of think about is that, again, a decent amount of this is a nice to have for us sitting in our air conditioned apartment, sitting in San Francisco. It's nice to have digital currency, but it's not really life or death. Not yet, anyway. But I think for, you know, 4 or 5 billion people, I think it really is because they're being inflated away. They're trying to make a better life for their family. Their money is being confiscated by the government. And everything that we complain about is actually full blown happening to them. And so Where we might not be buying things with digital currency at the level that we would like to see is definitely happening in other parts of the world. And so, and who don't have access to US dollars. So maybe they're buying um,
Right.
USDT, or maybe they don't have access to the ability to move money around while they're leaving their war-torn area part of the world, but they can put it into digital currency because they can access to it. So yeah, I think that US still the prettiest leper. I think that it's going to be a much more digital world, and I think that what's nice to have for us is damn well necessary for a lot of people. And so I think we'll see more opportunities for people to move away from the US dollar. That's probably going to accelerate, but might not necessarily matter at the level that we think it will yet. Um, but yeah, we'll definitely see more talk and probably implementation of central bank digital currencies, which I think you were kind of alluding to. We'll see more and interesting stable coins across different asset classes and different types. And we'll just see better on ramps and off ramps. So yeah, I think that's where I think of the world. And that's slightly different than where I think the asset prices will be, but I think the use cases will definitely be there.
Yeah. So speaking of central bank digital currency and central banks in general, so I own a foreign exchange company in Canada. It's an MSB, a money service business. And starting in November of 2025, we are going to have to start reporting to the Central Bank of Canada. This has never happened before. So we're going to have to provide them reports on an either daily or weekly basis on all the transactions we've done. So I don't know what is going on or why a private entity would be involved in my business. It's really confusing because that's essentially what all these central banks are. They are not government institutions. These are private banks, and so I don't know how this is happening and or why. But if you go to the Central Bank of Canada website, you will see all about their central bank digital currency. It's all there for you to read. It's coming. They've been working on it for many years, not just Canada, the U.S. as well, the U.K., Europe. So they're obviously working on them. So you actually think there's a good probability that they actually pull this off? And how do you think they implement them? Because I don't know. I don't see how they can just say, here's your central bank digital currency. You got to start using these. I don't think it's going to play that way. Do you think there's going to be some type of an event? I have a feeling there's going to be some type of cyber attack on our current banking infrastructure, at which point they say we have to move to blockchain technology to make it more secure, to use central bank digital currencies. How do you see that transition happening with central bank digital currencies? Because it's definitely something they want to implement, and they want to implement it soon. So how do you think they pull it off? Like, have you thought about this much in terms of where we're going next?
Yeah, I think at first it's slow and then it's all at once, similar to taxes in general. If you look at various countries that didn't have federal taxes, they didn't have income tax, it was some sort of extra event like a war or something that, hey, we need to implement a 1% tax, 2% tax, and then now we're at 50% tax. Obviously wars were fought over much less than where we're at right now. So I think it's probably a slippery slope where they say, hey, get your $100, your free $100 voucher, sign up for your government branded wallet, and you get your
UBI.
$100. Yep, UBI, and then everybody's hooked on the $100. And again, I don't think if you look at all of these things we're talking about, they don't happen right away. They just take time, and different regimes come in and change things. So I think probably it'll seem very innocuous. It's like, oh, we're testing out this digital currency. I get my $50 to spend, and maybe it's everybody, maybe it's certain groups, and then all of a sudden, we look back at some point in the future, and there's price controls, there's spending controls. If you are a certain demographic, certain voting demographic, certain whatever, you might get better money, you get time to spend it, you get places you can spend it. So yeah, I think that like eventually we do get to that kind of draconian view of the world. I just think it seems like this really great $20, it's free, and then all of a sudden, oh, sorry, Michael, you bought too much alcohol last week, so you're not going to get your your $50 refund from the government. So I think that's kind of where we're going eventually.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, even what's her name, Lagarde, she came out and said that they're actually going to use their central bank digital currency to implement controls. So, like, I think she's one of the first ones to actually admit it publicly. And so, yeah, it's coming, and it's frightening to say the least. You don't think there's going to be a pushback by the citizens of wherever they're implementing those controls, or you think we're just going to accept it like we accept everything else?
I mean, again, I think this is going to happen everywhere. Clearly we're already seeing it in places like China. You use your WeChat, you have your wallet, you have your score, you have everything. Obviously, it's a slightly different regime there, but it's not that much different in time. So, I mean, sure, people are going to push back on the margin. But I'm telling you, if you say, hey, here's a free $50 to spend on whatever it might be, people will take the $50. And that's a very low bar, whatever number you want to use. Or it could be, hey, in Canada, your GST refund or your CRA refund. By the way, if you do it via our new app, you get an extra $50, or you don't have to pay a processing fee, or whatever it might be. Sponsored by Lululemon. So yeah, I just think that that's where we're going. It's pretty clear to me, and it's already happening with current controls.
For sure. And all more reason to own Bitcoin, right? I mean, the use case for Bitcoin just becomes stronger and stronger every day. I mean, based off of everything we hear from these different governments. So it's not going away. And that's the main reason I love Bitcoin and precious metals, because it's outside of the system. It's in your possession, it's in your custody. You can use it to purchase things. The government doesn't know you own it. They can't seize it. They can't control it. So, I mean, there's so many advantages, specifically for Bitcoin, especially since you can move it from country to country in seconds for very small costs. So, yeah, if you're not in Bitcoin, you got to get in Bitcoin. But Kevin, anything else you want to tell me a little bit? Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about Uniblock? Yeah, where can they find you?
Yeah, so uniblock.dev is our website. We're on Twitter at Uniblock. I'm on Twitter. I talk a lot about finance and things like this at Kev G Callahan. You just Google me, Kevin Callahan, Twitter or X, and I'll come up. Yeah, I love to interact with people. I think that the one thing that my family gave me, my dad gave me, was just an understanding of finance and just like how to make a dollar go further. And I think that if you can teach your children anything, just being able to take care of themselves financially, I think is very, very important. So yeah, that's what I talk about a lot.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. It was really, really great talking to you. Definitely hope to do this again one day, and let's keep in touch.
Let's do it. Thank you very much for your time again. Take care.
Of course. Thanks, Kevin. Take care.